2012 veterans and military construction spending. That debate resumes at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. At 5 o'clock, the Chamber will take up the nomination of a U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of New York. A vote on that nomination today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Live now to the floor of the Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, our sustainer and friend, as our senators deliberate over challenging legislative issues, infuse them with insight, energy, and patience. As they face relentless pressure from constituents, lobbyists, and special interest, give them strength and courage to do the right as you give them the light to see it. Resolving differences without rancor and bitterness, let their lives model the unity of your kingdom. Lord, lead them in the way of compromise that doesn't sacrifice principle or self-respect, preserving timeless values which are ethical, just, and equitable. Teach them to respect each other and your image, which can be seen in humankind. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., July 18, 2011, to the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Tom Udall, a senator from the state of New Mexico, to perform the duties of the chair. Son Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader is recognized.
Following any leader remarks, the Senate will be in a pretty morning business until 3:30 this afternoon. Following that morning business, the Senate will resume consideration of military construction, Veterans Affairs, and related agencies appropriation bill. At 5 p.m., the Senate will vote. We'll go to executive session to consider the nomination of J. Paul Etkin. At 5:30, there will be a roll call vote on confirmation of that nomination. H.R. 2018 is at the desk and due for second reading, I'm told.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
H.R. 2018, an act to amend the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to preserve the authority of each state to make determinations relating to the state's water quality standards and for other purposes.
I would object to any further proceedings, Mr. President, with this bill at this time.
Objection is heard. The bill will be placed on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14.
Mr. President, Senate Democrats sat down with Secretary Tim Guyton, and the picture he painted is as follows. That is a picture of what our world would look like if the Republicans in Congress forced this nation for the first time in its history to default on its financial obligations. The picture was really grim. This is how he described the state of our government. The state of our government, if Congress allows this unprecedented default, his quote, lights out. He said default would result in a complete, quote, loss of capacity to function as a government, end of quote. Even those who believe government should be small enough to drown in a bathtub have to admit that a total shutdown of even the most basic and essential function of government is very, very scary. Wouldn't be good for the American people, and it certainly wouldn't be good for our economy. The Senate has no more important task than making sure the United States continues to pay our bills for pre-existing obligations like Social Security. Now, I have spoken to the President's office today. I actually had a phone call scheduled with him, and we rescheduled it for later, but I've talked to his people, and he understands the importance of our meeting our responsibilities that we have. And because of that, we're going to stay in session every day, including Saturdays and Sundays, until Congress passes legislation that prevents the United States from defaulting on our obligations. I've spoken to the Republican leader. He understands the necessity of our being in. We have a lot of things to do. Not as many things as normal, but extremely important things that are going to take time. So I know it's maybe inconvenient to have people rearrange their schedules, but this means Saturdays and Sundays and Mondays. We have to be in session continuously. Secretary Geithner described how the 80 million checks cut by the Treasury every day, that is 80 million checks every day, would likely simply stop coming. The federal government would, in effect, go dark. Paychecks for troops in Afghanistan and Iraq and bases around the world could stop. FAA towers could shut down. So could the FBI and the CIA. Border crossings could close. Safety inspections of food Americans eat and cargo that enters our ports could halt. Literally every function of government could cease. Social Security checks, payments to our veterans, we've heard that before. There would be no discussion of which operations and personnel were essential. All the payments would very likely stop. Some have said we could prioritize which bills to pay. Even if that wouldn't irreparably damage the nation's credit and our reputation in the global economy and the global community, which it would, it is also a complete fiction. Our government won't even be able to cover the bills due on August 3rd. It will simply run out of money, and because we'll be in default and our credit rating trashed, we'll be able to borrow the money, not again, to keep running, even if we wanted to. That's the picture Secretary Geithner painted. Like I said, it's grim. Many of my Republican colleagues understand this fact. They know what's at stake. It's not blanket for sure. But the irresponsible Republicans say default would not be an unmitigated disaster for this country. Either don't know what they're talking about or are twisting the truth for political gain. Americans have gotten the message. 71% of the American people disapprove of the way Republicans have used this crisis to force an ideological agenda. That's in the press today. Even a majority of Republicans disapprove of their unreasonable refusal to compromise, which puts our entire nation at risk. Those who say this crisis would be a blip on the radar are wrong. Default would be a plague that could haunt and would haunt our nation for years to come. Our credit rating would take years to rebuild. The country would never, ever be the same. Some will say this is an exaggeration, but it's not. This is what Treasury Secretary Geithner told us. That's what business leaders, economists, rating agencies, and bankers have all told us. If this country defaults on its obligations, they say, Secretary Geithner for certain says, and I quote, it will be much worse than the Great Depression, close quotes. It would make the massive financial crisis of 2008 look mild. It will make what we just went through look like a quaint little crisis, Secretary Geithner said. I repeat, it will make what we just went through look like a quaint little crisis. That quaint little crisis led to the loss of almost 5 million American jobs. It caused our banking system to nearly collapse. More than $34 trillion. Mr. President, that's not million, it's not billion, it's trillion. More than $34 trillion in wealth was destroyed in less than 2 years. The ripples were felt throughout this nation and around the world. The average American family lost $100,000 on its home and stock portfolio alone, and 400,000 families were plunged into poverty. That crisis was minor, Geithner said, compared to the potential fallout from U.S. default. No one should suggest, from what I've said, Secretary Geithner thinks what has taken place because of the Wall Street collapse is minor. But it's minor compared to what he believes would happen if we defaulted on our debt. The leading business and economic voices of our time said it again and again. The risks of default are unthinkable. It would be a catastrophe. Secretary Geithner also said we're running out of time to avoid this iceberg. This huge iceberg, Mr. President, is in the ocean, and our ship of state is headed toward it. The rating agencies have already placed our AAA credit rating under review and could downgrade us at any time. This is what Secretary Geithner said. Again, I quote, "The eyes of the country are on us, the eyes of the world are on us, and we need to make sure we stand together and send a definitive signal that we're going to take the necessary steps to avoid default." So, Mr. President, I ask what it will take to get my Republican colleagues to wake up to the fact that they're playing a game of political chicken with the entire global economy. They must wake up soon, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Republican leader is recognized.
Let me echo the initial remarks of the Majority Leader with regard to the decision, which in this particular instance I think we would agree was a mutual decision, that we need to stay in every day until we resolve this crisis confronting our country. And so I concur with what the Majority Leader has said. We'll stay in here every day, Monday through Sunday, and get this problem fixed for our country.
Mr. President, I'd like to interrupt my friend through the chair to say this. I would hope the Republican leader noted the tone and content of my statement, where I didn't lump all Republicans in one big bundle here. Pardon the interruption.
I thank my friend, the Majority Leader. This is a pivotal week for America. 2 years of reckless spending and debt have brought us to the point of crisis. And this week, Americans will see how their elected representatives decide to resolve it. On the one side are those who believe that failing to rein in spending now would be calamitous, and that a government which borrows 42 cents for every dollar it spends needs to sober up. Washington needs strong medicine to heal its spending addiction now, not a false promise to do it later. And on the other side are those who want to pretend the status quo is acceptable, that everything will be fine if we freeze current spending habits in place, raise job-killing taxes on small businesses, and do nothing about the long-term fiscal imbalance that imperils our economy. Now, Republicans have tried to persuade the President of the need for a course correction. But weeks of negotiations have shown that his commitment to big government is simply too great to lead to the kind of long-term reforms we need to put us on a path to balance and economic growth. So we've decided to bring our case to the American people. And that's why this week Republicans in the House and in the Senate will push for legislation that would cut government spending now, cap it in the future, and which only raises the debt limit if it's accompanied by a constitutional amendment to balance the federal budget. The Cut, Cap, and Balance plan is the kind of strong medicine Washington needs and the American people want. And Republicans in both houses of Congress will be pushing it aggressively this week. I heard one of my Democratic colleagues say yesterday that the votes simply don't exist to pass any bill in the Senate that balances the budget. My question is, why in the world not? If you can't vote for a bill that says you'll live within your means, then you've given up, and you agree that the unsustainable path is the only one we have. And that's really completely unacceptable. Every single Republican in the Senate supports a balanced budget amendment. All we need is for 20 Democrats to join us. And by my account, at least 23 of them have led their constituents to believe that they'd actually fight for it. So my message to Senate Democrats this week is this. I would suggest you think long and hard about whether you'll vote for cut, cap, and balance legislation that the House is taking up tomorrow. Not only is this legislation just the kind of thing Washington needs right now, it may be the only option we have if you want to see the debt limit raised at all. The White House has called for a balanced approach in this debate. Well, a bill that actually balances our books is coming to the Senate floor this very week. I strongly urge my Democratic friends to join us in supporting it. Some have said they think this bill goes too far. With all due respect, I think most Americans believe Congress and the White House have gone too far in creating the fiscal mess we're in right now. It's time for real action. It's time to show the American people where we stand. It's time to balance our books. Now, on another matter, Mr. President, earlier today, the President announced his nominee to run the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I would remind him that Senate Republicans still aren't interested in improving anyone to the position until the President agrees to make this massive new government bureaucracy more accountable and transparent to the American people. Back on May the 5th of this year, 44 Republican senators signed a letter to the President stating, quote, "We will not support the consideration of any nominee, regardless of party affiliation, to be the CFPB director until the structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is reformed." And we've been very clear about what these reforms would need to look like. Republicans have voiced our serious concerns over the creation of the CFPB because it represents a government-driven solution to a problem government helped create. We have no doubt that without proper oversight, the CFPB will only multiply the kind of countless burdensome regulations that are holding our economy back right now, and that it will have countless unintended consequences for individuals and small businesses that constrict credit, stifle growth, and destroy jobs. That's why everyone from florists to community bankers opposed its creation in the first place. That's why we'll insist on serious reforms to bring accountability and transparency to the agency before we consider any nominee to run it. It took the President a year to nominate someone to this position. I hope he won't wait that long to address our concerns and bring the CFPB the accountability and transparency it currently lacks. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 3:30 p.m., with the senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
we're just here on the Senate floor, a quorum call. Senate came back in morning business right now. They'll be resuming consideration of the Military Construction Veterans Affairs Spending Bill at 3:30. And at 5 o'clock, senators will be in an executive session to consider the nomination of J. Paul Oetken to be a U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of New York. Votes on that nomination at 5:30 Eastern. Over on the other side of the Capitol, the House is back in also today, working on a number of suspension bills and some roll call votes scheduled after 6:30. And today in the House, the Rules Committee is going to be marking up a bill dealing with the debt and deficit starting at 5 Eastern. They're going to get that bill ready for consideration on Tuesday. And the bill over in the House deals with cutting current spending, capping federal spending, and requiring that any increases in the debt ceiling depend on a balanced budget amendment. In the Senate this week, Majority Leader Harry Reid says the Senate will be meeting every day, including weekends, until Congress sends President Obama legislation to deal with the debt and deficit. Congress is facing an August 2nd deadline to raise the debt limit to avoid a first-time-ever default on U.S. financial obligations. And currently right now on our companion network, C-SPAN, we're hearing from Senator Tom Coburn and his $9 trillion plan to cut spending over 10 years and the debt and deficit reduction.
Recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise to speak about the budget and the debt ceiling. Following the state's failure to invoke cloture on a measure expressing that shared sacrifices from all Americans, including the wealthiest, are necessary to reduce the budget deficit. As the Senate Budget Committee Chair has proposed, we must reach an agreement that strikes a balance between raising revenues and cutting spending, in which all Americans contribute to the solution. Congress faces a very important task. Americans are following this debate because they have a stake in the outcome. If we do not raise the debt ceiling, it will force the government to choose which of its many obligations it will meet. As President Obama pointed out last week, we cannot guarantee that veterans and Social Security recipients will receive the checks we owe them on August 3rd if we fail to reach a compromise. If we fail, we will damage our credit rating and worldwide confidence in our financial system. To avoid such a situation, I call on all of my colleagues to negotiate in good faith so that the creditworthiness of the United States is not compromised. I hope we can reach an agreement that will bring down the debt without placing most of the burden on the vulnerable among us, the sick, the poor, the long-term unemployed, and the elderly. Mr. President, while we must reduce spending, we cannot forget to continue investing in our nation's future. I came of age during the Great Depression and served in World War II, along with my colleagues, Senator Inouye and Senator Lautenberg. We were the beneficiaries of one of the federal government's greatest investments, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, more commonly known as the GI Bill. This visionary federal legislation enabled returning World War II veterans, many who, like myself, came from families of modest means and may never have otherwise attended college. The GI Bill not only changed the lives of its beneficiaries, it changed the United States by laying the groundwork for the emergence of our middle class, which remains the backbone of our country. Many other valuable investments made in the years that followed, such as the interstate highway system and federal funding for research programs at the nation's leading universities, propelled America into one of its history's greatest periods of economic expansion, social advancement, and technological innovations. None of these investments simply happened. They were made by past Congresses and presidents from both parties. These legacies have proven repeatedly that dedicated social and economic investments are effective drivers of recovery, growth, and future success. As we move forward and make difficult but necessary choices to cut spending, we must strengthen those programs that are restoring our economic health. Reaching an agreement on the debt ceiling and deficit reduction will undoubtedly require all of us to make difficult compromises on spending and revenues. As debate on these issues continues, I urge each of my colleagues to remember the obligation that we have to preserve the nation's creditworthiness and to defend our veterans and those depending on Social Security and other safety net programs from harm as we continue to make needed investments for recovery. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Thank you. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further proceedings of the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, I wanted to speak for just a moment here about the status of the discussions that the members of Congress have been having with the President and others regarding the debt ceiling, the extending of the debt ceiling, and how we can solve the problem that confronts our country. Obviously, in 10 minutes, I'm just going to be very brief and hit some of the highlights. But the first question that was asked on a program that I was involved in was, well, why wouldn't Republicans be supportive of raising taxes? And I wanted to answer that. There are three answers to that question. The first is, if you go to the doctor and he's going to treat you for what's wrong with you, he needs to figure out what's wrong with you first and then treat that condition rather than something totally different. And the reason that we're not going to want to raise taxes here is because it has nothing to do with the problem we have. I meant to have this chart actually blown up, but I wasn't able to do that in time here. This shows how much money that we are spending. And as you can see, when President Obama came into office, the spending just spiked dramatically to the point that we've historically spent about 20% of the gross domestic product of the country. And now with the Obama spending, we've gone straight up to about 25% of our gross domestic product. The problem, in other words, is not taxing. The problem is spending. And that's the first reason we should focus on spending, reduce federal spending, and not try to focus on the tax code, which is not the problem. The second problem with raising taxes as a part of this exercise is that the taxes that the President is talking about are not just on millionaires and billionaires. There are 319,000 households that report income of over $1 million. So you can say 319,000 billionaires or millionaires. But there are 3.6 million households also in the same tax bracket that don't report incomes of even $1 million. So as we've done before with the alternative minimum tax, for example, we aim at the millionaires and billionaires, but we end up hitting a lot of other Americans. And so this isn't just about taxing millionaires and billionaires. And who are the other people that would be the target of the tax increases proposed by the President? Well, we know that 50% of all of the small business income is reported in those top two brackets. And so the first thing you have to think about here is doing harm to the economy. If you're hitting the small businesses, who, by the way, historically create 2/3 of the jobs coming out of a recession, if you're hitting them with more taxes, you're going to inhibit economic growth. And that's a problem that's recognized even by the Obama administration and by the President. Remember last December when he reached agreement with the Congress and we extended the existing tax rates. Sometimes they're called the Bush tax cuts. But those tax rates have been in existence for a decade now, and they were extended another 2 years. And at the time, the President said, in time of economic downturn, that's the worst time to raise taxes, so we shouldn't do it. Well, we're still in an economic downturn. One could say even worse than it was back then. We're now back up to 9.2% unemployment. The economy is not getting better. It's still sick, and the worst medicine for a sick economy, as even the President has said, is a tax increase. One of the taxes that the administration sought to increase was the subject of a report by the Obama administration Small Business Agency, the SBA. And it said that this particular tax increase, I'm quoting now, could ultimately force many small businesses to close, end of quote. Well, why would you propose raising a tax which could ultimately force many small businesses to close? It doesn't make sense. That's the second reason we're focused on wasteful Washington spending, not on raising taxes. The third reason to talk about the problem with raising taxes is related to the second, and that is the effect that it would have on job creation and the economy. If you add up the tax rate that will result from the automatic tax increases in January of 2013 and the tax increases that are part of Obamacare, the top rate in this country will be 44.8%, and that's before your state income tax rates. Now, corporations pay 35%, and they get a lot of deductions, so they don't always pay 35%. So here you have a small business person who's paying 10 percentage points above what a big corporation pays. And the 35% is too high. The President himself has said we should get rid of corporate so-called tax expenditures or loopholes so that we can, with that savings, reduce the corporate rate in America to something closer to 20 or 25%, which would make American businesses more competitive with our foreign competitors. Well, if we need to reduce the corporate rate down to 20 or 25%, it makes absolutely no sense for us to have the small business entrepreneurs in our country paying almost 45%. So that's why we don't want to raise taxes on small businesses. Moreover, some of these taxes are not just on those who are in the top two income tax brackets, but are in businesses that, I mentioned the retailers and manufacturers that would be hit with one of the taxes that the SBA says could ultimately force many small businesses to close. So those are the three key reasons why it's not the time to raise taxes, why we'd ought to be focused on spending. Spending is the problem. It's gone up from 20 to 25% of the gross domestic product in this country. We've had a deficit now of $1.5 trillion each of the 3 years of the Obama administration. The Obama administration, in just 5 years, if it gets the first year of a second term, in 5 years would double all of the national debt of this country, all the way from George Washington through George W. Bush. So if you take all presidents and the debt that we have acquired, and then you double it, that's what happens under 5 years of the Obama administration budget. And then the second 5 years would triple it. That's the problem we have. It's not taxes, it's spending. Secondly, because you're not just hitting millionaires and billionaires. And third, because it would be very, very bad for the economy. Now, the administration has said, well, it's just not fair. We need some shared sacrifice, is their term, some shared sacrifice. And I've got two answers to that. First of all, how about before we sacrifice, before we ask people to sacrifice, let's get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse and initiate savings that the Office of Management and Budget, the General Accounting Office, the CBO, all of these groups have found exists in our budget if we would just get about it. There is over $100 billion a year that we could save just by not making overpayments or improper payments in Medicare, Medicaid, and unemployment insurance. Just those three alone. In unemployment insurance, $1 out of every 9 is improperly paid out. What's wrong with a government that has that kind of error rate? That's $16.5 billion a year. In Medicare, the error rate is over 10.5%, in Medicaid, 8.4%. You could save $87 billion a year just in those two programs. That's well over $100 billion a year. And what does the administration say to that? No, we don't want to talk about that. That's not shared sacrifice. That's not any sacrifice. You're not taking any benefit away from any beneficiary by just enforcing the law that Congress has passed. The administration says no, doesn't want to talk about those things. And the other reason is, I'm just asking here, what really is fair? What percentage of taxes do the top, I mean, you got to admit the top 1% of American taxpayers are wealthy people. And so do they pay twice as much in taxes? I mean, they represent 1% of the taxpayers, of course. So do they pay 2% of the taxes? How about 5? Does the top 1% pay 10% of all the taxes? 20%? 30%? How about 38%? 1% of the people pay 38% of the taxes in the country. Now, I'd call that shared sacrifice. The top 10% pay almost 70%. So how much do you want the top 10% to pay? 80%? 90%? How fair is that really when the bottom 50% pay nothing? And 30% of them all receive, well, all of them receive benefits from the government, and 30% of them receive an EITC benefit or payments back from the government in some other form directly to them. So you got half the people that pay no federal income taxes. The top 10% pay 70% of all the income tax. Now, we've said that's okay. We want to have a progressive tax rate. And the OECD, these are the developed countries of the world, have done a study, and they make the point that we have the most progressive income tax system in the world. Of all of the developed countries in the world, we make the wealthy pay the most. We've said that's okay. But how much more can this one group do? They cannot carry the entire government on their back. So it is, frankly, political demagoguery for anybody to suggest that either we can solve the problem by taxing corporate jets, or we can solve the problem by having millionaires and billionaires pay more than they already do. That only gets you a little bit. The people that end up paying the taxes are the broad middle class. That's the way it always is. And so beware of the politician who says, I'm just going to target the rich. You don't have to worry about it. The tax on millionaires was supposed to hit about 125 millionaires, the AMT. It now hits something like, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 million Americans. So, Mr. President, that's why I say we've got to solve the problem. The problem is spending. It's not revenues. And so when people ask me, well, why aren't you willing to meet the president halfway and agree to raise taxes, those are the three reasons. It would stop our economy from creating the jobs it needs to create in order to get out of this economic doldrum that we're in and begin to produce the kind of economic recovery that produces wealth. When you're not unemployed, you're not working, you're not making money, you're not paying taxes to the federal government. We can we can pay the federal government a lot more in tax revenues every year if we go back to work and if we're making more money and we're more productive as a country. But as long as we're in the condition we're in right now, the federal revenues are going to decline. And that's the answer. Get the economy moving again, and you don't do that by imposing another heavy burden of taxes on it. That's why we have to focus on spending, and I hope, Mr. President, my colleagues and I can work together in the days to come, reach agreement so that we can actually get this country moving on a path toward economic recovery and sound fiscal future. Mr. President, I note the absence of, excuse me.